Horizons 3 is on Arena right now, and most importantly, it's draftable. Welcome everybody, my name is Alex. You might know me from the LimitedLevelUps podcast and YouTube channel, and I could not be more excited for this set. Modern Horizon sets are my absolute favorite sets to draft, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to fill you in what's going on in this set, and as always, we're going to talk about some cards that you should look out for if you want to win those drafts. So if you've never played a Modern Horizon set before, let me give you a bit of a rundown of what to expect. Number one, really powerful cards. Since Modern Horizon sets are designed for play specifically in Modern, the play design team over at WotC just gets to let loose, really take off the training wheels, juice cards in ways that they couldn't normally in a standard set, and I think that makes for a really exciting draft environment. For example, we've got a card like Galvanic Discharge, which, as you can see, the energy mechanic is returning, classically a very powerful mechanic, and this is the kind of removal spell that you just wouldn't see printed in a standard level draft set. It's 1 mana to deal 3 damage at instant speed. It could be more than 3 damage too, right? It's 3 damage in the early game, but if you've got a bunch of energy, this can take out a 6 toughness creature if you wanted to. Or early in the game, you take out a 1 or 2 toughness creature, you get a little bit of energy left over to spend on something else. So this is the kind of removal spell you're gonna see in this set. So that's a good example of the type of removal you can expect in this set. What about the types of common threats you can see? Well, those are also pretty push. You got something like Writhing Chrysalis. This is 2 green-red for a 2/3, and when you cast it, you get 2 01 Eldrazi spawn tokens, and these spawn tokens they sacrifice for mana. The Chrysalis has reach, and it also says whenever you sacrifice another Eldrazi, put a +1/+1 counter on Writhing Chrysalis. So by itself, you're getting 3 bodies that you can sacrifice for various things. You can use the spawns to ramp you, and as the spawns ramp you, this grows into a massive threat. This is the kind of card that would be one of the stronger uncommons in a normal draft set, but we get this at common. And so that begs the question, if the commons look like that, what do the uncommons look like? Let's look at Cursed Wombat. This is a card that might look familiar to you if you've been playing a few years. Winding Constrictor, a card I know is a favorite of a lot of people, has seen play in Constructed, still sees play in people's commander decks. Cursed Wombat pretty much does what Winding Constrictor does, but also has an adaptability, so it can become a massive threat itself. So a high power level is something that you should expect when you play a Modern Horizon set. But the second thing that I love about Modern Horizon sets are they're this perfect marriage of new and old. Almost all the cards in the set aren't brand new designs, new cards that you haven't seen before, but so many of them reference Magic's past. So for example, we have White of the Reliquary, which is a zombified version of Knight of the Reliquary. We've got Evolution Witness, which is a callback to Eternal Witness. When Serum Visionary enters the battlefield, you cast, you guessed it, Serum Visions. You're also going to find cards that are a twist or an alternate version of cards that you know quite well. For example, we've got Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury. So this is a callback to Uro, Kroxa, the Theros Titans. Flage is actually a character that existed in the lore already, and they went, hey, let's make another Theros Titan. And the third thing that's really cool about Modern Horizon sets, I mentioned that most of the cards in the set are new cards, but there's also a handful of old iconic cards that are getting reprinted into Modern with this set. So Phyrexian Tower is a really great one. Deep Analysis is one of the best card draw spells of all time. And then for the commander players out there, you might be familiar with cards like Toxic Deluge and Ophiomancer, both really good cards in Limited as well. And one last thing I want to call out before we get into the limited strategy side of things here. Yes, this set is called Modern Horizons, and I've been talking about how these cards are legal in Modern and designed for Modern, but on Arena, you can still play these powerful cards in Timeless, in Historic, in your Brawl decks. And very good news, a lot of people have asked me about this. This set is not going to cost any more to draft on Arena than a normal standard draft set. So obviously everybody likes that. All right, and without further ado, let's get to talking about some cards, shall we? So I'm going to touch on the main archetypes you're going to find in this set, point out some cards I think are pretty important. Let's start with the energy archetype. So energy is divided across all colors in the set, but at common and uncommon, you're going to mostly find it in red, blue, and white. And if you haven't played with energy before, you can just think of it like an additional resource you get that you can spend various places. So for example, we already talked about Galvanic Discharge. That gives you 3 energy counters, and you as the player get those counters. They don't go away unless you spend them, and you can use all 3 energy when you cast your Galvanic Discharge if you'd like, or you can build up a big energy reserve and then use it on your other energy payoffs. And so the more energy cards you have, the more energy you're going to build up in your energy reserves as energy counters, and the more places you can spend it. So since you can find energy in 3 colors mainly, 3 of the 10 color pairs are going to be energy color pairs. They all have a little bit of a different flavor to each of them. Red-white energy with a card like Conduit Goblin, going to be a little bit more aggressive. Blue-white energy with a card like Riddle Gate Gargoyle is going to have a bit more of a flying theme. And then blue-red energy with a card like Cyclops Superconductor, it's a little bit more controlling. And of course, you're not limited to just 2 colors. You can splish splash around. Maybe if you're blue-red control base, you do splash some of the white energy cards. It's a very flexible mechanic. Often you're going to want to reach out into other colors to get more other payoffs. Some cards to call out here. So we already mentioned Galvanic Discharge. This is going to be a card that any red deck wants. I imagine this is going to be one of the top commons of the set, but especially if you are an energy deck, Galvanic Discharge is just going to be fantastic. Another 1-mana card I think is going to be very, very good is Tune the Narrative. So Tune the Narrative is a single blue mana for an instant. Draw a card, you get 2 energy counters. Just a super efficient way to fuel those energy reserves. And then as far as payoffs go, one of the better ones at uncommon is Amped Raptor. This is a 2-mana first strike 2/1. Then when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. And then, if you've cast it from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You can cast that card by playing an amount of energy equal to that card's mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So just so much value for your 2 mana. Imagine casting Galvanic Discharge on turn 1, killing a 2-drop, being left over with 1 energy, casting Amped Raptor on turn 2, and then getting a free 2 or 3 drop on top of that. Just fantastic. All right, next archetype to talk about is Eldrazi. The Eldrazi are back. We've got new versions of Emrakul, Ulamog, and Kozilek, and we're mostly going to talk about commons and uncommons, of course, but if you do open these, don't be put off by their expensive mana costs. There are good ways to get to that much mana, 9, 10, 11, 12 mana. Specifically, one to call out are those Eldrazi spawn tokens that we looked at a little while ago. Those are really good ways of doing so. A lot of Eldrazi creatures will just make these when they enter the battlefield. You're gonna want expensive things to spend your mana on when you have those cards. And another thing to call out about the Eldrazi and these Eldrazi spawn tokens is they produce specifically colorless mana. And you're gonna find cards in this set like Breaker of Creation, for example, which costs 6 colorless, that you can't just use anything. This isn't generic. You need specifically colorless mana to cast these cards. You're gonna find Eldrazi in blue, red, and green, but also sort of that 4th color too of colorless. Something like Twisted Riddle Keeper, for example, is gonna need both blue and colorless. Looking at the color pairs here, we've got green-red Eldrazi and blue-green Eldrazi. Green-red Eldrazi is focused a little more on just beating down and making giant creatures, like with that Writhing Chrysalis we pointed out before. Blue-green Eldrazi, on the other hand, with a card like Snapping Voidcraw, it's a little more focused on going big, casting those 7, 8, 9 mana Eldrazi. And I think a card that's going to be great for either of those decks is Eldrazi Repurposer. This is a 3-mana 3/3 that has Devoid, which basically just means it's a colorless card. Yes, there's green mana in the mana cost, but for things that care about colorless cards, these Devoid cards are colorless. And when you cast the Repurposer, you get a spawn token. Off the bat, you get a 3-mana 3/3 plus a spawn token. That's really good. And then when the Repurposer dies, you also get a spawn token. Just a lot of value for your 3 mana. Again, these commons, they're really, really pushed. You wouldn't see this kind of card in a normal draft set. And an important piece of this Eldrazi puzzle that you're going to want to keep an eye on is there are 10 lands at common that produce colorless mana, but also go get 1 of 3 basic lands. So for example, we've got Bountiful Landscape, taps to add a colorless, but you can also sacrifice it to get a forest, island, or mountain. Also has cycling for green, blue, red. These cards are strong. They're fixing for both those colors and colorless mana, of course. They cycle in the late game when you don't need them. Sort of like an Evolving Wilds, but better than that a lot of the time, because if you just need that untapped mana, you can have that, and you can't always have that with Evolving Wilds. And don't overlook cycling. Cycling your lands in the late game, that's pretty powerful too. All right, and the last archetype I want to call out here is the modified deck. So you're going to find modified payoffs in green, white, and black. And what modified says is a modified creature is something that is equipped, has an aura on it, or has counters on it. And there's a bunch of ways in this set to get all 3 of those things. So let's look at a payoff quickly here. Golden Tail Trainer. It's a 1 green, white, 1/3 uncommon. It says aura and equipment spells cost X less to cast, where X is Golden Tail Trainer's power. And that line of text in a lot of sets might be a little bit throwaway. There might not be that many enchantments or artifacts you actually want to put in your deck, but in this set, that's not true. It also says when the trainer attacks, other modified creatures you control get +X, where X is the Golden Tail Trainer's power. So how are you modifying your creatures? Well, We looked at the Cursed Wombat a little while ago. There's the adapt mechanic, so some creatures will just put counters on themselves. And there's two really cool mechanics from Magic's past that they brought back that are some of the best implementations of equipment and the best implementations of auras, in my opinion. The equipment mechanic we're looking at is Living Weapon. So something like Mandibular Kite is a single mana equipment with Living Weapon. And what Living Weapon says is this comes with a 0/0 Phyrexian Germ token, and you attach this equipment to it. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 in flying, and the equip cost is 4 mana. So you're paying 1 mana for a 1/1 flyer. By itself, that's already a modified creature. And then, you know, if this dies or you want to move the equipment over, you can do that. Solves the problem of sometimes in your equipment decks, you draw all your equipment and none of your creatures, or vice versa. And it's just like, well, my deck didn't really function. Living Weapon solves that issue very nicely. Also, I just think Mandibular Kite is one of the better cards for this deck, so keep your eye out for this one. And then the aura mechanic, which is really cool, is Bestow from Original Theros. So an example here, Nyxborn Unicorn, 1 and a white for a 2/2. It's got Mentor, so when it attacks, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature that is smaller than it. But it also has Bestow for 4 mana, which means that you can cast this as an aura on a creature, and then when that creature dies, you get the Nyxborn Unicorn as a creature. Bestow is a really nice way to get around that issue of getting 2 for 1 with your auras, or just not having creatures to put your auras on. Both these mechanics play really smoothly, and I'm glad they brought them back. And all the stuff I just talked about is only just scratching the surface of what this set has to offer. It's jam-packed, so dense with so many interesting cards. I just love going through Modern Horizon sets and just reading the cards. Really, truly, it brings me joy to be like, wow, that's a really cool card. I hope this set can bring you that same joy. I think it's just a little bit of something for everybody. Like I mentioned, this set is available to draft right now on Arena for the same cost as any other draft set, so happy drafting.